Welcome to FYIVT, your inside source for news and in-depth analysis on what's really happening in Vermont. We want to start by saying thank you to all our listeners and supporters. Your continued encouragement fuels our mission to dig deeper and bring light to critical issues that shape our communities. We couldn't do this without you. Today, we're diving into our article titled, "The Rising Crime and Overdose Crisis." Vermont, long celebrated for its tranquil communities and stunning landscapes, is facing a growing storm. Crime rates are climbing, drug overdoses are at an all-time high, and residents are left asking, what's happening to the state we once called one of the safest in the country? Is Vermont's approach to justice and public safety helping, or could it be part of the problem? Crime is on the rise. Crime, particularly violent crime, has risen sharply in recent years. Cities like Burlington, once symbols of Vermont's peace and stability, are now seeing increases in robberies, assaults, and even shootings. Meanwhile, property crimes such as burglaries and vehicle thefts have surged. Why this sudden shift? The COVID-19 pandemic and its economic fallout certainly played a role, but experts are pointing to another factor: Vermont's criminal justice reforms. Over the past decade, Vermont has pursued a bold goal: to reduce its prison population. On paper, it sounds like a compassionate, progressive move. Nonviolent offenders, especially those struggling with addiction, are often steered away from incarceration and into treatment or diversion programs. But here's the question: what happens when these programs don't work? What happens when offenders return to the streets without meaningful intervention? Many are reoffending, and the cycle of crime continues, leaving communities to bear the burden. Take this scenario. A person struggling with addiction is arrested for theft. They're released quickly or placed in a program, but without proper treatment or structure, they fall back into the same patterns. Can we truly say this system is working? Critics argue that Vermont's lenient approach has gone too far, creating a revolving door of justice that undermines public safety and erodes trust in the system. A growing overdose epidemic. And then there's the overdose crisis, a heartbreaking and deeply intertwined issue. In 2023, Vermont saw its highest number of opioid-related deaths in history. Fentanyl, a synthetic opioid far more potent than heroin, is driving this epidemic. Its presence is insidious, often mixed with other drugs without users knowing, leading to accidental overdoses. If Vermont was once insulated from the worst of the opioid epidemic, that time has passed. Rural areas thought to be safe havens are now just as vulnerable as urban centers. How did we get here? The pandemic didn't just disrupt daily life, it severed critical support systems. Isolation, anxiety, and a lack of access to addiction treatment created a perfect storm. Imagine a person battling addiction, suddenly cut off from their lifelines. What options do they have? For many, the answer tragically became drugs, relapse, and far too often, overdose, where crime, addiction, and policy meet addiction. The connection between addiction, crime, and Vermont's approach to incarceration is clear. Addiction often drives people to commit crimes like theft to support their drug use. But if these individuals are released back into the same environment without meaningful consequences or effective treatment, how can we expect anything to change? Are we setting people up for failure while leaving communities to suffer the consequences? Some say Vermont needs to rethink its approach. For repeat offenders, incarceration may not just be punishment, it could be a chance to intervene. Imagine a system where jail time comes with robust addiction treatment and pathways to recovery. Could this be the key to breaking the cycle of addiction and crime? Others argue that the focus should remain on community-based solutions and that Vermont must double down on investments in mental health and addiction services. But can those programs succeed without holding individuals accountable for their actions? The road ahead. The real challenge lies in finding the balance. Vermont cannot simply lock its way out of this crisis. At the same time, an overly lenient system risks enabling the very behaviors it seeks to change. What's the solution? A smarter approach to justice, one that combines accountability with compassion, ensuring offenders receive both consequences and support. As Vermont moves forward, these are the questions policymakers, law enforcement, and community leaders must answer. How can we protect our communities while addressing the root causes of crime and addiction? How do we ensure that our justice system is fair and effective, not just for offenders, but for the victims and families affected by these crises? The road ahead won't be easy, but Vermont has an opportunity to lead. By striking the right balance between enforcement and rehabilitation, the state can turn the tide on crime and addiction, restoring hope to communities and reclaiming its reputation as a safe and healthy place to live. Thank you for listening to this episode of FYIVT. To read the full article and explore more on what's happening in Vermont and how the state works, visit us at FYIVT.com. We appreciate your support and look forward to continuing to bring you important perspectives on Vermont's most pressing issues. Until next time.